Hi, and welcome to another episode of Nursing Your Way to Wealth, where a mental health nurse and an accountant talk about wealth creation, personal development, and financial independence in the UK to help you live the life you deserve.
So today, Alex and I thought we would discuss workplace pensions, which is a timely thing for me because this is Alex the nurse. I've just taken a new job and I've just been enrolled in their workplace pension scheme, and I've just had 25 pages worth of pension documents through the post. So we're going to unpick a little bit about this pension itself. I will provide some figures, real figures of what I would have, certainly if it was left in the default fund. We'll also talk about what it would look like if we made some small tweaks early on. And this is assuming this pension will run for about 30 years, because I'm 35. We'll grab some expertise from our accountant, Alex, and we'll really emphasize and talk about the importance of getting these long-term investments right as early as possible.
Yeah, hi everybody, and I'm I think really excited for this episode because it really puts into practice what we've been talking about over the last few episodes, and I think what we're going to talk about is like we'll go through Alex's pension statement in detail, and it's quite surprising actually. Well, one the sheer volume of information that you get sent, but almost how complex it sounds, and actually, and the fees that are being charged. And I think there's like an inherent complexity that's almost designed into these things to put people off actually looking. And I think if you almost make something more complex and hard work to digest, then actually you're more likely to just leave it on the side and not look at it. So by just having a read through this and trying to comprehend what it's saying, there's opportunity to optimize some of this. It does require a bit of work and kind of time and attention to look through it. But I think if you look over the long term, because these are going to be lasting 30 years, probably longer in a lot of cases, it's really important that you take the time to look at it and change it if needed, because any course that you change now is going to have a big impact later on. So yeah, I'm keen to get into it and almost bring to life some of the things that we've been talking about.
Sure. So yeah, just on the bit about setting the correct course, I think I've got half a memory of reading somewhere that if you sail a ship from England, I guess, and you point it at the US, and if you get your course off by 1 degree at the beginning, you actually end up hundreds of miles away from where you actually intended to be. So this is important. I mean, pensions have changed quite a lot. They're quite new as a financial instrument. They've been around, certainly auto enrolment in the UK has dramatically changed it will change the livelihoods of a lot of young people. And that's been around since October 2012. And it's really, I think, one of the best things that a politician could have done, or a political party could have done to help just a huge amount of people have a good and dignified retirement. So first up, it's a workplace pension scheme. It's not a self-invested private pension or SIP. It's something that's offered by my employer, and they're offering a salary match. So if I put in 4%, they will put in 6%, and after 2 years, they will put in 9%, which is probably actually outside of the NHS, it's one of the best workplace pensions I've had. So it's really worth you asking your employer how much is the maximum they would put in. Because if they're sticking in 5 or to your pension and they're willing to put in 10, you're leaving a load of money on the table. So all it takes is a simple email to whoever works in HR or in the pension scheme, something like that, and just say, look, what can you offer me? Because employers won't tell you this. They'll keep more money. And actually that money is due to you. You work hard enough for it. So make sure you take as much of that maximum match as you can. So you'll always suggest figuring that out. If you have any questions about it, email us as well, and we'll guide you as best we can. So with this plan, first up, when I signed my contract, it said under the pensions part, will enrol you automatically into our workplace pension scheme from month 3, leaving me to work for 2 months without any employment or contributions from me. I've always asked for every job I've had, can I be enrolled from month 1? And every employer I've had has said yes. So I just did a quick bit of maths to begin with. That decision for me will make me £5,000 richer in retirement just for starting 2 months early. So you can really tell the shape and the power of some of these decisions that we're making. So they might state that they'll only do it from month 3, but if you ask them, they're really likely to say yes, certainly in my experience. So first up, ask that question as well, and how much they'll match as well. With the pension documents I'm looking at, and sorry if you hear some page flipping, as I said earlier, I've got 25 pages worth of this to sift through, which is, it's quite a lot. And we're going to look at some figures of what I would get if I were to just shove this paperwork in a drawer, leave it alone, and then cross my fingers that when I'm 60, 65, I have enough to live off. We're also going to look at some figures if we were to make some slight tweaks, changing out of the default fund, which I always find are a little bit vanilla in terms of risk appetite for me. And we'll look at the power of getting these decisions correct from the beginning. Alex, is there anything else you want to mention before I start flipping a load of pages and spouting figures?
Yeah, I think for me, like the pension match that you have is really, really good. Like if you put in 6% and your employer is putting in 9%, that's one of the best that I've heard of, actually. And what a powerful way to build wealth. And I think that's one thing is workplace pensions are an excellent tool to do that. So I think that's mainly just to emphasize a point that you've already made. Is really what I wanted to just wanted to get that in there.
Yeah, it is quite good. Just so small correction to that. So this company will put in 6%. If I put in 4% for the first 2 years, and then after 2 years, they'll put in a maximum of 9%. So it's a little bit, you've got to work a little bit extra, but I think that's a real good bonus to retain people, especially after that 2-year mark, when certainly young people, especially me, start to get itchy feet. That would be something that would really make me question leaving a job like that, because the additional 3% per year, I don't think I'd be able to find anywhere else privately, charity sector outside of the NHS. So it's a good benefit, and it's actually one of the reasons I specifically searched to find a job with this charity.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I think I may have misheard you at the beginning, but yeah, that's a really, even still, is a really good benefit. And yeah, I've not heard of the pension contributions increasing after a certain amount of tenure. And yeah, I mean, still, what a great benefit. And I think often, probably a slight tangent here, but when people start looking for jobs, they're very much focused on just the headline salary, whereas you really need to consider the match that you're going to be getting from a pension, because it's real money, it's yours, it's not yours directly in your bank account at the same time as your salary. It's obviously deferred, but it's still a really big part of a compensation package. So yeah, I think really, really good point.
Definitely. I think a lot of people do only look at salary, and then not only the yearly salary, but how much that will make them per month. And then they just live from that. If they can survive their lifestyle on whatever they'll get paid per month is, I think, probably one of the main kind of thinking points before people accept or don't accept jobs. But yeah, do look at the whole compensation package. What else can they give you? What other benefits can you get? I mean, we've touched on this before, but pension contributions are one, whether you can work from home, whether there's subsidies for professional subscriptions or anything else that you use for your job. If your employer is willing to help you out with those costs, it means that you don't have to then earn the money to pay tax on it to then pay that back out. So really dig into it and ask them questions. If you're not sure, you want something clarified, they're there to answer these things for you. So that tangent aside, let's have a look at all of these documents. So it's A plan that's supposed to run for 30 years because I'm 35, and I think it's set to stop when I'm 65 in 2053. So that makes this plan 29 years and 5 months as of 1st of February 2024. And actually, they weren't going to start me from February. So I sent a quick email to the pensions person and said, actually, I think we've made some error here. I asked to start from January? And they did that. I sent them a small portion of my salary back, and I got nearly that much back into my pension. So I sent them back £212, I think, and then they put that plus another 166 into my pension. So without spotting that and rectifying it, I would have been a little bit poorer come retirement. They give me there's loads of different figures here about if your earnings increase each year, you'll end up with this much, which is helpful to know. The plan itself is, I'm not going to name company names, but it's a mixed investment pension, and it's between 40 and 85% shares. So the shares or equities, as we've discussed in our previous investing episodes, that's really the growth engine of any investment. And a pension is simply an investment in the market. It's just a little bit perhaps better understood to provide you an income in retirement. So this is between 40% and 85% shares. And then it's already what we call lifestyled. So the term lifestyle, I'll briefly explain it. Alex, jump in if I butcher any of this or you think I've missed an important point. So it's designed to leverage your risk when you're young to be quite high. And then when you get close to your retirement age, it de-risks that to retain as much of that growth and that money as you have. So you don't have any alarming wobbles right before you retire. And then you have to extend your retirement date into the future to recoup those perhaps losses if there are any. Alex, is that a fair depiction of lifestyling, or do you think otherwise?
Yeah, I think that's a model answer. I think if you almost split it's almost thinking of it in two ways. One is the accumulation phase. So that is when you're younger and you're actively putting money into your pension. You want to give that the best chance to grow. But then as you get closer and closer to retirement, you go into more of the money preservation phase. And that is when you need your money to be there because you're going to be relying on it and for your income. And you're not going to have the time left to be able to top up that pension. So yeah, absolutely. And it's fairly common for pensions to kind of automatically do this for people.
I think it's their attempt at taking another perhaps difficult or not very well understood job away from the employee so they can just focus on work, family life, etc. So yeah, that's where we're at the moment with this. It's mixed shares, bonds, other things. So I've done, being the nerd I am, done a bit of digging into it, just of the splits of equities or stocks and also bonds. There's also a bit of cash here and some other UK gilts and things. So as of this current pension, if it would be the one that I would choose, it's 60% shares or equities. And those are just shares of companies, and they're split between international equities, 38.9%, probably US based. And then there is 20% UK equities, and these are just shares in companies that you and I use every day. And they're things that you see all around you. So they're transport, they're healthcare, they're construction, they're all the famous brands that you see in here from all around the world. It's small shares in each of those companies. The next part of this is 16.7% is international bonds. Bonds are loans to government paid with an interest rate. There's a surprising thing here that 8.4% of my pension will be left in cash. It says cash/money market. And then there's 4.5% in UK gilts. And then the percentages get really small. So I stopped writing at that point because I ran out of paper. So, Alex, what are your thoughts on that as a split between equities, bonds, cash and gilts?
Yeah, so I think if you think of it what should a good allocation be for somebody of like your age with 30 years left to retirement? And you want to be, a fair chunk of your portfolio in equities, I would say. And I speak from my personal allocation here, at least 80%, if more, not more, closer to 90%. It's strange how there's, over 8% is in cash. I would expect that to be much lower. There's usually a residual 0.5% or something like that sat in a cash balance, sat in cash or in money market funds. And then bonds is, it's not unusual to have bonds in there, but you're probably wanting to be on the lower end. They say like 10 to 20% in bonds. But yeah, it just seems fairly, that the cash allocation to me just seems fairly high considering where you are.
Same. I mean, I thought, given that we've got a long time horizon, so I've got 30 years left of working, or at least till I can claim a pension. It's probably going to be a few more years than I expect because the government keep raising the age. But I was thinking, for me, at least an 80-20, so 80% of shares and equities to really drive growth over the next 30 years, 20% bonds just to smooth the ride a little bit. And then to have like a smattering of like cash, perhaps like a really small amount, as you said, 0.5% probably at most. So I was a bit surprised to, certainly to read that. So I'm going to dig a bit more into the geography of it, of just where it's invested around the globe. So, and again, I was surprised. It's 27. I'm going to round these figures up or down to the nearest kind of area of rounding. So 27% UK, which is actually a small area or subsection of the global market. It's 24% US, 15.5% developed Europe. There's the 8.4% cash, 4.5% Japan, 4% emerging Asia, and then 11.1% is just titled other. And I could not find where this 11.1% is. Nearly 10% of my retirement kind of pension portfolio, and I could not find, obviously, with even a quick look on their website or in any of this paperwork, what that means or where it is.
Yeah, did you say it was developed Asia was 5.5%, and then it's the 11%, which is other?
Yeah, so I said 4% is emerging Asia.
Sorry, that was it. Yeah, emerging Asia. Okay. Yeah, because my other thing would be, I wonder if, or whether other is, I don't know if there's many other countries for that to fit in. Yeah, interesting. But it seems that I would have expected them to be able to break down something, the other bucket into, you'd expect maybe a couple of percentage points to be other, or like miscellaneous, not a tenth of it. So yeah, I think you raised some really good points on that. Because if you were to just look at, say, just buy a global equity fund, you've got much more weighting towards the US. I think they carry about 60% of the weighting actually in a kind of globally weighted index fund, and quite a high percentage of UK. And it could be your pension provider is from Britain, and therefore there's a bit of home bias. But if there's anything in your documentation to explain the rationale behind those allocations, it would be, definitely worth trying to understand that.
Yeah, there's nothing that explains it. There's just charts and pages of figures. If I put in this, I should end up with that. And there's a thing on fees that we'll discuss as well. I think it's just, it's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, if it just says other, it could literally be anything. It could be, I guess, commodities perhaps, or at the other end of the scale, it could be they're investing in Antarctic, I don't know, seal farming or something. I don't know. It literally could be anything at all. It could be given to tiny businesses as like grants or loans or something. It's I guess I just don't like being in the dark. And if you're one of us who likes to dig into this kind of thing to ensure your financial future, having a little bit there that's not very well explained, it can be a little bit difficult. So and also you said US is like about 60% of the market of a developed index fund. And the UK, I think, is what, 5%, or is it 4%?
I think it's single digit percentages. Yeah. So it seems a fairly heavy weight to the UK.
They're giving me 27% UK when actually it's 4% of the global market, or 5%, and 24% of the US when it actually is 60%. So it seems a bit, if anything, backwards.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, seems certainly not weighted based on the value of the markets, which usually it is in these kind of passive funds. So yeah, bit of an odd one, but I think that I'd say just in terms of changing allocations and things, there's, I guess, a couple of ways of doing it. Obviously, you can change the different funds. You can like speak to the provider and see what their options are. But if it's like a target date, like a target retirement fund, say 2055, which would be you retiring in 30 years, and because of the way there's like the glide path where the value of equities will shrink as a portion of your portfolio over time. If you wanted to be more aggressive, there's ways if you could almost shift out your retirement date up for the fund. So instead of doing 2055, you could do 2065, and therefore you can still take your money at the age where you turn, 55 or 60, or whatever the age will be when you can access a pension. But it will be your allocation to equities will be higher, and therefore more chance of higher returns.
Sure, and I think it makes sense. I mean, I'm certainly going to approach it from a flexible retirement date. I'm not going to say like, man, when I'm this old, I must retire, and what will be will be. If I need to, if that happens and I'm ready a little bit early or a little bit late, that's okay. So that's the point of having a little bit of flexibility there for sure. So I wanted to just touch on the fee structure for this, because I read this page the other day, and I've just read a bit more about it. So there's a whole page about fund fees, and there's lots of kind of jargon as well kind of involved here. So it says, what your plan costs, a summary, you'll be charged 0.68% of your fund value each year. And as the fund grows, that percentage of the charge they'll take will go up. But at the bottom down here, it says annual fund charge 0.65%, and then additional yearly charge 0%, fund manager expense charge 0.03, making the total 0.68. I didn't know that there would be a fund manager looking over it. Not a clue on that. I mean, it's not a hefty fee, of course. If it's a lot higher than 0.5%, I'd be a little bit worried about that and changing something to prevent that. But yeah, there's two fees here combined into one, which is 0.68. And right at the bottom of here, it says a fund with a fund manager expense charge of 0.05% means that every year will charge you 50 pence per £1,000 you have in that fund. That, to me, written down there, doesn't sound like a lot. You'll think, well, 50p in 1,000 is not much, but when you add many, many, many thousands, it can certainly add up on top of the other annual fund charge. And interestingly, it does not give you that breakdown for the annual fund charge either, because that would be a bit higher. And I think that would mean more people would ask questions of it. So interesting, they break down the smallest fund and detail that, but they don't break down the higher one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's a bit naughty, actually, isn't it? You think look, if you think you and I are familiar with the language that they're using these, and it's very hard to get a clear picture of how much you're actually going to be paid and what that means in a pounds and pence type way. And I think it's back to the point at the beginning of it almost just seems designed to be very confusing and quite misleading. So I don't know if you've felt that as you've been trying to unpick everything here, but it certainly sounds like from listening to it for the first time, it's very muddled.
I absolutely do feel a bit muddled by it, and I've been learning about finances 5 years now, maybe more, and certainly you've got much more financial acumen than I do. And I really don't think it's as simple as it could be, for sure. So I would 100% argue that we need simpler statements. So actually, the firms that provide these are held to higher standards for what they would charge. So we'll keep flicking through. This was page 7 of 9. I'm going to go now. The next page is virtually blank, and it just says 100% of every payment will be invested in your plan. So they don't skimp a percentage at that point. They just take some fees once it's invested. The final page is about charges and how they will affect your plan. So it says here, what might I get when I'm 65? All the values take into account inflation of 2%. So no additional charges have been facilitated to pay for advice. The 4th and 5th columns show the same values, which again is a bit unnecessary, I think. So it says how charges can reduce the rate of your fund. So with all the charges we've discussed at 0.68% over 30 years, or 29.5 years to be pedantic here, the reduction in value of my plan is, it'll go from £325,000 to 293, which, if I can mental maths, that is 25 plus 7 is 32. It's £32,000 less I would get because I've been paying 0.68% per year to this pension company. I would argue if they wrote that down on here, there would be kind of uproar about it and people would ask a lot more questions. So that loss in my pension scheme value of the 32,000, that's primarily driven, not primarily, it is driven by the fees each year that I'm paying. So if I can change this fund out of that to a fund that pays a lot less of a fee, which I'm gonna definitely do, I'm gonna get to keep much, much more of that £32,000. I mean, I've earned it, so I'd like to keep it. I'd like to be driving a Maserati when I'm 65, not not driving one. So I think that's a really important bit. And actually, Alex and I have done some maths. Is if I were to leave it invested in this fund, or I were to make some tweaks with a 30-year time horizon. But Alex, have you got any thoughts on that? Perhaps I should have sent you all these documents before we recorded, but we're too late for that now.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those things where you kind of read this, the small print, and it's 0.65% for this and 0.03% for that, and it's only 50p, and you almost get lost. But then actually you get to the summary, and all those small percentages, all that they sound small and they sound insignificant. That's £30,000 that you're essentially losing 10% of your pot over the time, over your kind of the 30-year time horizon, purely giving it to the pension provider. And look, there's always going to be cost with investments, but it's I think with points that we've raised on like our kind of smaller series on investments, the costs really do start to add up. And if you can cut those fees in half, or going on to cheaper funds, it can have a material impact. And I think it just goes to demonstrate how confusing these documents are. And I completely agree. If rather than saying, there's breaking down fees in a kind of hard to understand way, having that clear up front, because you've had to read this on page 9. If this is on the front of your document of, based on this, your value would be X. Because of our fees, your value is actually going to be Y. That's much more powerful and puts it into pounds and pence, as that the kind of normal, member of the public would be able to understand a lot better than, having to read through the document. I imagine you're one of a handful of people that have actually read the documentation for their pension as well.
Yeah, I for sure think I'm one of a select few. I might ask my colleagues. I sit in an office with about 10 or 12 people. I might ask them, show of hands, who's read any of their pension documents at all. And I bet I'm probably the only one, maybe one other person to put their hand up. So, yeah, it's interesting. So we did a little bit of maths. I mean, this is obviously high levels, not taking into account salary increases over time. So, or the impact of inflation at this point. Actually, no, we did take inflation into account, right? No, ignore that. So if I were to just leave this pension fund well alone with this company, paying these fees for the next 30 years, I would have £340,000 in my retirement pot. This is roughly 340,000, give or take a few. By the time I'm 65, if I were to make these early changes that I'm going to do, and we'll take it out of this default fund, we'll pick a global index, low cost, low fee tracker fund, something like perhaps the S&P 500. Obviously, others are available, things like that. We're not saying do it, but just this is the example that will work for me, and you can make your own decision about doing that. So if I leave it well alone, £340,000. If I were to make the changes that I'm suggesting, which I'm going to do, I would have £445,000. And that is £105,000 difference for what will be a couple of hours work when you're in your 30s like me. If you're in your 40s, it will still make a huge difference. If you're in your 20s, it will make an astronomical difference. And that, my friends, is Maserati money for a simple change. And all you're doing is keeping more of the money that you've worked really hard for. And I'm going to use that £105,000 to drive a Maserati when I'm 65. And it all stemmed from this one small change. And that, Alex, to me is really, it's mind-blowing that this stuff is so technically worded as difficult and it's hard to do. And I might do an update on how cumbersome it is to actually change this fund within my pension account. I might just drop that into another episode. But to have 105,000 extra pounds when you hit retirement that's a colossal amount. And I think it could even be more than the average current pension now. I don't have the stats on that, but it's ridiculous in terms of difference in value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start to, I think this is what's tricky with pensions. They're quite hard to comprehend because it's over such a long period of time. And it's that, to your point earlier on, if you set sail from the UK and you just are out by a couple of degrees, you completely miss America if you were aiming for America. But just small changes, and that's for a couple of hours work and maybe a few headaches of conversations with your pension provider will be, I think, clearly more than worth it. And you can take me for a spin in your Maserati. Yeah, hopefully you get like some nice cream leather or something like that.
Heated seats. I'll make sure of it. You can borrow it for the weekend. I've just done while you were talking, I've just done a quick Google, and there's just some research by the ONS, so the Office of National Statistics for Great Britain. The average pension pot for someone between 55 and 64 is £107,300. And if this tweak is going to make me an extra 105, that means it gains you another average pension pot for someone else who's not had this knowledge, who's not worked on this in advance. And let me just see if I can find when those. So fact checked, updated January 31st, 2024. So it's basically you're doubling up on the average pension by having all of that again. So I hope this has been helpful. We're going to wrap this one now because Alex needs to get some trains. And if we can help with things like this, if you just want to run a query by us, just send us an email. Our email will be below this episode, and it's in some of the sounds that we put in at the end. I forget the technical word for that. They're really important. Don't let it slide. Ask the questions of your employer. Ask them of the pension scheme. Ask them of HR, and really understand what you could get. Often people are leaving money on the table, money you work too hard for. So do the learning, make the right decision, and I'll see you at the Maserati dealership, I suppose. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
None of what we discuss on the show is to be considered financial or health advice, and we recommend you always do your own research or consult an independent financial advisor or a doctor when making your financial or health decisions.